Hey guys, this is Dave with Ancient Amnesia. I'm here with Josh. We're going to discuss the South African stone circles today. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this stuff. Michael Tellinger is well known for doing a lot of videos on the subject. They're stone structures that are in South Africa, and they're prehistoric, and they're very mysterious. And some people think they've got them explained, and some people are probably so far off it's crazy. But we're going to talk about it today and see if we can make heads or tails of this. So what I want to do here is introduce Josh. Josh, say hey, man. How you doing?
Doing great, guys. Good to be
Cool.
here.
Good.
Gonna be fun.
What I want to do, Josh, is I'm going to go right to the first picture here. I'm going to do a screen share. So we are going to go up here, and I'm going to show you guys a picture of what I'm talking about. Right there. Now, some people say that these are, fairly recent in the last 10,000 years for storing cattle. They call them cattle crawls. Some people say that they're cymatic patterns that are created to specifically bring a certain type of energy out of the ground there. But, when I kind of look at it, to me, the cymatic pattern doesn't make sense because it's not real even like a cymatic pattern would be. These things could possibly be 250,000 years old if we go back to the occupation of people in the area at the time. So that's what's really mysterious about this, and the fact that they're so far from everything, not many people get to see them. So you've seen these things before, right, Josh? Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, South Africa is one of the most kind of, I guess, underreported places that not many people think about. We all hear that we come from Africa, and there's a lot of evidence that hominids were down there early times, and this is where a lot of this stuff kind of started. So it definitely has this kind of mystique to it because some of this stuff is really, really old. I mean, there's reported evidence of hominid type intelligent beings being down there millions, a long time ago, millions of years ago.
Right.
So these structures could be really, really old, and stone doesn't really, you can't date it. So when you look at that, sure, it looks like it could be like a Roman fort, a medieval thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff could be much, much older, and we know humans were down there. And so, we don't know a lot about what's going on down there, but there's a lot more to it than people realize. So this is good that we're reviewing this.
Yeah, that's the thing that hits me is, some of them have been dated. Some of the material there have been dated, and it's just a really wide ranging series of dates. So apparently these, things were either used or occupied or at least known of up until recently, because they've got dates on stuff that's, just hundreds of years old. But what, a lot of people say is, well, they look like there's some sort of livestock, storage or a place to keep livestock or somewhere to, store grain or store seeds or something like that. And so, I said, well, there's probably evidence of that kind of stuff around. So, I went over here to this Zulu culture, and the Zulus actually have these things called cattle crawls. And that's where they actually keep their livestock or their cattle. They actually live in these things, and they're circular, and they have circular formations and buildings within them. So that really, I had noticed this once reading an article, and this is what it reminded me down here was this is a little more, structured. But if you look at the green dots, they're kind of random. This might be a newer version of what those things actually are.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think about that? I mean, that's kind of strange.
Well, I mean, one thing is for certain, like they were storing something, whether it been humans, livestock, material.
Right.
There was things that you wall things to keep things in. So the question is, what was in there? And then we have the whole problem of, well, let's date this building because we found bones next to it. Well, we know that if there's a structure that's already up, I mean, even as recent as the medieval times, that we're using Roman stones, Roman buildings, and there's roads today in Italy that were built by Romans that you walk on. So if you are in a future, 1,000 years of the future, and you date someone from 2000, 18 or 19 that died right next to a Roman road that was built 2,000 years earlier, and then you date that Roman road to the evidence that you found, then this is what we're kind of doing in the archaeological world. This is why we have a really hard time dating things like the pyramids and Stonehenge and all these other things that we we look
Right.
at, because we could just see that there was human occupation next to them, but it could have been thousands of years later. So, but yeah, definitely something
True.
stored. But you're definitely right. These things would be not as wildly structured. I mean, look at this is the Zulu
Right.
people. They're not.
Right.
They're using wood and they're not using stone. Is that
Yeah, and
correct?
they're still basically exactly as they were 1,000 years ago. They really haven't made any attempts to change their use of building materials. And
Right.
also you notice these have entrances. That's another thing. The other ones don't have entrances. They don't have any sort of doors unless the place where the door has been wiped out or knocked down or demolished. But yeah, the ones that we're talking about in South Africa down lower, yeah, they just don't have doors. That's the weirdest thing. There's no windows really. I mean, you got these little areas up there where some of it's collapsed, but was that an entrance or was that where just a part of it collapsed? It's hard to say, but they don't really look like the interior chambers had a lot of openings and they're really not very useful sized areas that are cordoned off in the center there. I mean, look at
Mhm.
that little tiny one. What did they do there? Was that a chimney? Maybe
Right.
that was a stove or a cooking area or something. But they're fascinating, man, because they're so natural looking. That's just
Yeah.
what gets me, man. Is they just look so like they're flowing with nature and they're as a part of the countryside. And
Right.
whoever built it, clearly had an eye for art and an eye for making something not only useful but attractive because
Yeah.
it looks really cool.
Yeah, that's kind of how the Celtics did things too.
Right.
If you look at the way that wood grows or vines grow, it's erratic. But it's still elegant, and it follows the Fibonacci sequences and things like that. So there's kind of like this
Right.
natural order to things. And when you build that way, you're able to kind of move within the field of resonance and things that you're working with the powers that are you're using. You're using the same design that you're building with the materials with, right? So, but yeah, I mean that's definitely interesting that you have this kind of structure because it's kind of unique, and we don't notice this even today. We don't notice them building quite like this. There's no, if that was a home, it's definitely built just kind of all over the place.
It
Why
would
is it?
be really,
Why
if someone built something like that today as a home, it would be on YouTube as like, oh, super unusual home.
yeah, yeah,
But there's millions of these things over there. So back then it wasn't super unusual. It was the norm. So that's basically what they did. I mean, they had a lot of
Dave,
time to think about it too, I'm sure.
Dave, have they done any type of radar map and looked at to see if these structures
Yeah,
are part of?
there's LiDAR. There's some LiDAR, but not much. Like I said, it's real expensive to go there.
Mhm.
It's out in the middle of nowhere, political turmoil, especially if you're, a white researcher, you're really, there's a lot of places you're not going to be welcome, and they don't want to see traipsing around on their land or flying over it. But, there's a lot of places where they know there's more, just by the look of it during the rainy season or the dry season, they sort of get that, look, when they're flying over, they can look down and you can just see, thousands of these things, just everywhere.
Mhm.
You go a little bit farther away to Zimbabwe. This is another one that I thought was kind of interesting.
Wow,
This is
look
called
at
the Great Enclosure, and there's adjacent ruins there, as this shows. And the ruins seem to be sort of similar or very similar to what we're just looking at in this little like city area. But if you look at that wall is completely different from what we see around all these little circles. It's an actual structure. It's built much larger, much more sturdy. It looks like it's much more accurately built. Was it built at the same time, and maybe this is where the elite lived, or was this some sort of ceremonial place? But I thought it was really weird that in Zimbabwe there would be one with such a modern-looking wall.
Yeah, what's
Part of
a thing about walls is that at a certain height, it's more that you're trying to keep things out than keep things
Right.
in.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
this looks a little more like a protective structure.
like a fortress or something.
Yeah, or something
Yeah.
that was built to protect something.
Now they talk about it being built between the 11th and 15th century, and it's continuously inhabited. So, but you look at it and it looks very similar to what we're seeing.
So
Yeah.
let's scroll to the map on Africa. Let's
So-
just kind of get a reference here.
Yeah. So down
So-
here, South Africa,
Mhm.
down here by Maputo in the corner. This is the area where the stone circles are by Maputo, by the gold mines.
Okay.
This is north of that, which I would say is probably 400 miles in Zimbabwe. You know, so basically, you know, it's, you know, the style would carry over. You know, the people that were from Maputo, I'm absolutely certain would have interacted with the people from Zimbabwe, you know, in that short of a proximity. So I would have to say the reason that looks like it did is it's been built along a period of time. It wasn't all just built in the 14th century. That tall wall, now I'm guessing that tall wall, that might have been some sort of fortress they built, but it actually looks like something else that's almost 10,000 years old in Malta, which is Manadra. You know, that structure, the way it looks, see the oval with an oval inside of it. I mean, I know, people will say, oh, well, yeah, that's a fortress. That's how they look. You know, they are always that shape, but you know, why would they continue using that shape if they weren't probably the same people?
Well, when we look at the map, one of the things that we want to look at as you kind of like expose the map a little more, is that this area here, okay, this is a whole area just like Egypt, where we're finding out that, you know, as we push our past further and further back, we've been, you know, starting to awaken to the fact that there could have been this cataclysm, that could have been civilizations before it. You know, we know that even modern humans, the hominids, are being pushed back further and further. We keep finding that we're older and older, that the technology is older and older, that the actual biology of a hominid, you know, is older and older. So here we are at the cradle of human civilization, and here we are at the bottom of it. This area here could be one of the most unexplored and oldest and you know, mysterious places that we have yet to really kind of zoom in on and check out. So this area you're talking about here, this kind of 1,000-mile circle, you know, there's a whole thing going on here that we have yet to really uncover.
Well, look over there to the side. What do you see? Madagascar. You know, what's one of the most bizarre places on Earth, with the most bizarre animals and the most unusual species and weather and climate and geology. It's like, it's I think it's probably top 3 strangest places on Earth. Madagascar is, you know, I mean, and there it is right there. So there's a reason that it's such a diverse island, you know, I mean, it's like a complete different place from South Africa. You know, it's wet. It's like jungle and has really nasty geology that you can't cross. You know, you have to have a helicopter to get around anywhere, you know, out there.
Yeah, there's trees and animals that don't grow anywhere else.
There's volcanoes. There's like a whole row of volcanoes on the island. I mean, you know, some are dormant, and you know, some may not be. Some, you know, have erupted in history. It's a crazy place, man, and it's right there. So yeah, that's another thing to look at. Now, the trade routes are what's important too to look at when you see islands like that. Is you always gotta, anytime you want to figure out what people are doing, is you have to look at where does the stuff go first when they put it on a boat. It goes to probably the closest island, you know, for, you know, replenishment and all that. And so Madagascar would have possibly been a place where, you know, there was a lot of trade going through. But
that's where they also got a lot of material they couldn't find, right? So they
the really wild wood.
There'd be certain wood. You know, there's a tree on Madagascar that's called the boab.
The boab.
And the boab tree is really interesting. This thing can it can hold over. I mean, it's tens of thousands of gallons of water, you know, it's unbelievable. It's one of the most amazing trees. We actually posted something on it.
It's like a giant begonia. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I posted something years ago on Ancient Amnesia on it, but
how do you say that? Baobab?
I think it's called the boab.
Boab or baobab. Yeah, I remember seeing that. Yeah. So yeah, that's what you got out there. You got really crazy stuff, you know, and you know, I'm not going to say it was alien DNA or they were out there doing genetic experiments, and that's why, you know, they got all these weird lemurs and stuff. But yeah, who knows, man? I mean, the Sumerians wrote a lot of crazy stuff, and not a lot of people have really had a whole lot of success deciphering what it really means. You know, there's a whole lot.
Is Madagascar the island of Dr. Moreau, Dave?
It probably was. Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah. Yeah. You know, you see it, you know, as you're approaching it in the boat, you know, it looks like a skull or something, you know, and you sail into the mouth, and I think Dr. Evil's in there waiting for you.
So what else do we got?
So you got that, and now down here, check this out. This is the great enclosure. Here's the complex. So you've got a separate hill complex, and if you look at that, you can see there's a lot of circles and oddly shaped circles drawn around it. A lot of similar kind of building techniques, maybe not techniques, but building shapes and styles and forms. Everything is very circular. And, you look at the great enclosure, it has circular enclosures within it, and a partial inner wall. So I would say whoever built this stuff is definitely an ancestor of whoever built the ones down in, far South Africa, for sure. And I think what happened was these guys actually moved northward. So
it could be the same civilization.
Yeah. So these guys actually, here, let me show you the cymatics real quick. See, these are cymatic patterns. They're called Chladni patterns. And Chladni patterns are basically based on, resonant frequencies or balanced frequencies, just like music. And so these are very perfect. So if someone was trying to, duplicate, a tone by building a shape of a building, they're far from perfect. You're not going to vibrate the ground at, A sharp, by building a rock structure a certain way. You might be able to chant inside of it, and you might be able to use that as some sort of sound funneling, which is actually what we see happening in Malta. Is there's some echo chambers or whatever they call it. But these are cymatic patterns, so you're not. That's definitely. I think we could probably weigh that one and just put it on.
And in the Temple of Saqqara, you actually have you have sound resonance in there. They've done tests that in the burial chamber, which who knows if it's really a burial chamber, but in the burial chamber, the sound of Om, right, is the only thing that resonates. So if you were to do it loud enough, it would literally ring for minutes.
Right.
And afterwards, anything else just basically hits and dies. So like there's chambers in there that allows certain frequencies to basically resonate in just kind of like a tuning fork.
Yeah, they're tuned. They're called a resonant chamber. Yeah.
That's a resonant chambers. And so
like what a magnetron uses or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Now these are, this is Manadra. This is actually in Malta, which is Northeast Africa, off the coast there. And basically there's 3 or 4 temples on Malta that are like this. You look at them and you see right away, you see the 2 doorways, just like the Great Enclosure in Zimbabwe. You got a doorway in the middle and you got a doorway on one side and it's closed off on the other. So that's real similar. They're circular, they're megalithic. There's multiple ones attached to each other. Really similar. And now this is thousands of miles away from South Africa, where the original ones we were looking at are, but look how similar they are, but they're sort of upgraded, they're built a little bit more sturdy.
Yeah. And Malta is actually one of the most mysterious places, because they don't really know how to date it. There's cart ruts, in Malta that are, are not Roman. They're something much, much older. This is actually dated to this is one of the oldest places in Europe. I don't think there's much older than it in terms of megaliths in the region. So this is and people, certain researchers like Graham Hancock and others, they believe this is pre-cataclysmic. This is something that existed, much older. This is a prehistoric or a Pleistocene or Ice Age type dated civilization. So, and we're going to talk more about that in our megalith podcast, but yeah, we can't date this stuff. We don't know how old it is. And the fact that it just relates exactly to the stuff that we were just looking at. I mean, there might be some common dating between these 2 structures. This could be 15,000 years old, 12,000 years old. I mean, we found Göbekli Tepe, so we know it does exist. And
that's where we're going next, man.
All right. Take us to Göbekli Tepe, Dave.
Well, look at this. It's like, just take a good look at that after what we saw on the previous 2 slides. Okay. And now we're going to go a couple thousand, well, not 1,000, maybe 700 miles north of Malta, right, to Turkey. Yeah. So we're going to head on up there. So let's see. Okay. This is the artist rendering after the final report from 2017. I guess they drew this. Right. What do you see?
Right.
What do you see?
And this, ladies and gentlemen, is dated. We know that this is 13,000 years old. So, there's no more arguments. We can't say, oh yeah, this dating of Malta or this dating of Great Zimbabwe is only 11,800. They don't know that stuff. Again, they cannot date the stone. All they can do is they can date the things they find around it. Well, this place here was sealed and buried, and no one ever was around it. So we got to basically, as a time capsule, we get to uncover it, and it is the largest archaeological site. Period. It's huge. I mean, they've uncovered 30% of it or less.
Look at that thing, man. Just look at it. It's absolutely beautiful. It's impressive, man. That is, can you imagine with a roof on that, what that thing looked like? I mean, if it had a roof of some kind, like it would have just been the coolest thatched hut you ever saw,
These guys were taught how to do this. Somebody knew how to do this. This isn't something they just threw together in 9,000 or 10,000 BC.
Right.
This is something that goes back. There's a legacy to this type of work, this type of knowledge.
Yep.
So what we're looking at is a remnants of something much older. And gosh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Like Stonehenge almost. If you take away all the small stones and leave the menhirs and the standing stones, it's almost like a Stonehenge. It's sort of like a Stonehenge, that's been dual purposed or, filled in between. It's like the pillars are embedded in these walls. But what I notice about the walls here is they're built with small stones, just like the ones in South Africa, and the tops are all uneven. They're not like this perfectly flat top. If these guys can cut a stone like that and make those beautiful sculptures of animals on those things, they could have got this stuff all level if they wanted to.
This is one of the theories on this particular site at Göbekli Tepe is that some higher advanced humans came in the area. Let's just assume they were Atlantean or something like that. They came in. They were already well equipped with all this knowledge. They had a civilization that was thousands of years old that had developed all of this technology. They came in and they said, hey guys, we're going to kind of show you how to do this stuff. And Göbekli Tepe was kind of like a construction training ground for them to be able to learn how to build walls and learn how to build these megalithic structures and put them up and figure out how to move them and all that stuff. And it was basically like this, giant structure. And this is just a theory that's coming out of the research on the ground.
I can't discount it. I can't say that it doesn't make sense. I mean,
why
would there not be a roof? Maybe they just, this is all about stonework,
Yeah, we noticed that no one lived here. This wasn't something that people lived at. So why go through the effort of putting all of this stuff up and not even
went to work?
Stick around, and then why bury it? I mean, if this was a site that was used for any reason, they wouldn't just bury it. They would just leave it, and they would leave the area.
Maybe they buried it because it was a lesson plan. Maybe they buried it because it's their curriculum, and if they hadn't buried it, it would have got knocked over by whatever was coming.
Right. Maybe they buried it because it taught them if they ever lost the knowledge, they could go back and see how it was built. I mean, I don't know.
Exactly.
But it's very, very fascinating. And
well, there you are. I mean, we just went, halfway across the planet, and then of course, this is near Stonehenge. These are this isn't really a real high-end LiDAR scan, but this stuff is all just everywhere in the UK, everywhere around Newgrange, all these circular structures. And if you look in the center of those two, there's partial interior walls. You have embankments to the bottom, all these things under just farmland, where people have been living for thousands of years. And, to them, it's just part of the features of the landscape, but it's, digging that up right there. I mean, there's got to be stuff there that would, answer a lot of questions, but there's just no one to do it. There's so many of them. There's just no one to do it all. Here's Stonehenge, and you look at it, and it's in exactly another form, just like those others. It's a circle, and then you have a circle within a circle, the Stonehenge part of the henge itself, and you have other circles within there. A lot of this stuff I think is astronomically lined up.
Oh yeah. Solstice, equinox points, solstice points, and then they found a bunch of wood hinges around it, and they realized that Stonehenge was 2 to 3 times the size and radius that they originally thought.
There were post holes.
This site,
around 100 yards or whatever.
Yeah, this site was used for thousands of years. This wasn't just erected and then lost. Like there's a potential of a few civilizations, using this particular site.
Well, it's bluestone, and bluestone, from what everybody says, is it's like the hardest thing to work with out of the stone that they have over there in that particular area, even within a 30-mile radius or whatever. Yeah, I mean, they weren't just, hacking at sandstone, which, you could probably do some sandstone work with a copper chisel, but, blue stones like these, and brought from a distance, and that old, yeah, it's definitely, in my opinion, the basic structure of Stonehenge, like you said, a wood henge was probably there before. And then they realized, well, after that hit and, the cataclysm hit, the wood henge is gone. We better build it out of stone this time. And I think that's why a lot of these structures popped up right after the cataclysms, as people said, well, okay, if that happens again, we, can't have everything just completely wiped out that's important to us. So, they really started building with these large stones, and it was important that they carried through, like you said, Göbekli Tepe. They had to teach people to do it. They had to renew the information and the knowledge and the skill. And, it was like, there was probably a handful of teachers that, like, I guess who you would call a Saint Germain, would just travel all over and just share all the secrets. And,
well, I mean, one thing that would happen after a cataclysm is that you would have a potential misalignment of the planet, and so there's
right.
there's a theory that astrology began post cataclysm to a large degree because they were trying to reorient themselves. They look in the sky. Remember, these people they acknowledged everything was about patterns, like life patterns, right. Seasonal patterns. If we have some kind of planetary tilt or some kind of major cataclysm, comet striking, whatever happens. Pulsars, whatever you want to, whatever, all the theories that are out there. If something were to happen and it would change the tilt and axis of the planet to a certain degree, you would look up and it would be like, holy crap, everything looks different.
Right.
And so what you would have to have is an organized effort to realign yourselves to these new patterns, these new seasons, these new solstice points and equinox points and places that we can then, because this is how we farm, and this is how we followed animal patterns. This is our spiritual origins. This is where humans needed to kind of basically reconnect with that source, that planetary kind of energy. And so, you can see this obsession with them trying to put this stuff up and figure out where the hell they are now and what's going on. So I think that's a really good theory. It resonates with me.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to me that it would all be about regaining what they had as quickly as possible. To establish power, to establish control, to establish a safe way to feed the the people that survived, and to shelter them from further crap that might happen. I think there was a big resurgence in dolmens and heavy duty structures after that happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you kick an ant bed, the very first thing those guys do is they start rebuilding their damn their nest. That's
somewhere to hide from the shit.
They gotta rebuild it.
Yep.
So
that I thought was pretty cool. So Stonehenge. Now this is something here I'm sure you're familiar with. This is Serpent Mound in Ohio. I just thought it was odd because I was looking at structures that were either LiDAR or, subsurface, but you could still see them. And Serpent Mound came to mind. And so I went here and I looked at it, and, it has the, it's just like a totally different type of thing. But this shows the propensity for them building stuff that didn't have to be 150 feet high. It didn't have to be this enormous massive structure, to really mean something. They could just pile some earth up, and then, plant some crops on it or whatever. If maybe they had grass growing on it back then or whatever, it was wide open and dirt, shells or clay or whatever. But, around that same time, I think that, the respect for the astronomy, because it's, got alignments involved, but also it just is sort of a low kind of structure, and that's another thing about the South African structures, where they're low, they're not like really tall, they're not like houses, you don't have walls where, you can support a roof and stand under it, and that's
what's beautiful about the Serpent Mound is it's an elegant way. Instead of doing circles, instead of doing these, these megalithic kind of circles that you see that are, tracking the solstice points, here you have an amazing animal effigy, and this is the largest in America, in North America.
It is.
And so this thing is massive. And the fact that they were able to build something that beautiful on a scale that large, where you can actually only see its geometry and its kind of
just
dimensions from the air. I mean, you're 300-400 feet up there looking at that. And so down the ground, that would look completely different. This is much bigger than you think. You'd be just a little dot on that sidewalk. This is a way for them to say, hey, look what we can do. Not only can we track the stars and the solstice points, we can do it in beautiful, amazing way.
artistic way.
And there's probably definitely some piezoelectric energy current stuff going on with that
Well,
site.
a, there's an asteroid or a meteor crater right nearby.
Mhm.
It's really rich in iridium. So, they know it's definitely an asteroid or meteor because, they found tons of iridium in the soil. But I'm not sure how close it is to Serpent Mound. And I know Ross Hamilton is a guy that does a lot of research on this stuff up there. I haven't really studied it a whole lot, but I've heard that, that might have been sort of their way of marking when that asteroid hit or when that meteor hit, and sort of archiving it was what this site was all about. But, they've also found that it has alignments to the solstices and the equinoxes. So, but, the fact to me that it was just a low-lying kind of mound and it had a lot of circular features, it's not exactly like what we've been seeing. And then, you go down to Florida and you got this thing out in the middle of nowhere called Big Mound City. And these are all interconnected mounds. And, basically you have these semi-earthen embankments around each one. I think those were probably to divert the tide around the town, or the village when the tide would come through the mangroves, storm surges, stuff like that. But you see,
that's pretty amazing looking. If you look at the structure of that, it looks very spacey.
Yeah, it's all canals. These are all canals in there that are interconnecting. So they would take things in between the the different features of this site actually by a canoe through water, and their canals. And you look at it, it looks like the channels you see over in South Africa. There's some that are actually connected by channels like that. And then you also look at like Newgrange, and you look at Göbekli Tepe, and they all have these entrances that are sort of like a long tunnel. So I think a lot of this stuff, you'll see these channels here. They're also alignments. Those are solstices and equinox alignments. So that's probably what they did. They also, did double duty so they could, move stuff around the site, oysters or whatever, and people, and just they would have a ditch of water and you just pull a canoe down it. But at a certain time, the sun would set perfectly right down that channel, and everybody would gather, and probably in that center area, and that would be where the whole clan would gather and watch this stuff happen, because it's got that perfect central point. But this is another feature, it's concentric circles. It's got astronomical alignments, and it's.
Yeah, this looks a little bit more complex than canals. I'm looking at that, and to me, that's very modern, techie looking. That looks like an advanced.
Well, that's not actually the structure. That's a map of the structure.
Well, that's what I mean, though. That design itself.
So,
what I was saying is that if you look at that design, that's not, they're not slapping that together. That's actually very proportional. Those right. outer edges. That looks like, be honest, it looks like a damn, spaceship landing port, over there.
Well, that's how Ancient Aliens, got to be big, was stuff like this right here.
That looks really modern. Even just to us, that looks so cool. But that's amazing. And to think about places like Florida and like Mexico and the jungles, these things are hard. The earth just swallows them. Florida's got a lot of soft limestone. Things can get destroyed really easily. And
this has been underwater more than once, actually, this area. They had a really, really hard time getting out there and mapping it. And, they mapped it before they had LiDAR. So they had people on the ground, and they used GPS. And, I'm sure it was really, really tough because, it's a very unforgiving jungle out there. But, someone at some point lived there thousands and thousands of years ago, man. This one was occupied. They say they found stuff that's 10,000 years old, and they found stuff that's 500 years old. So like you said, such a complex site like this has probably been occupied on and off, for millennia, but it's in the middle of Florida. It's like out in the, I call it the jungle, Central Florida,
This is going to prompt us to do a show, and I'm going to go ahead and we need to do a show on ancient America, North America, and really just focus on kind of the United States area, because I hear all the time, and I have to correct people that like, oh, what's so cool about Europe is everything's so old, everything's there's America, that nothing's really that old. And it's like, no, actually you guys don't understand. There's stuff that goes back, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20,000 years here.
It's just as old.
It's just as old. In fact, there's some things here that you don't get a lot of in Europe and other places. So North America is kind of untapped. There's a lot of places that are hidden that we don't know about, that don't really get a lot of recognition. So we definitely need to start doing a little series on just North America in general. And
well, I definitely got a lot of stuff about Florida. I used to kayak a lot, so I'd go out and I'd kayak. I think you saw a video I did years ago on kayaking the local Indian sites. There's a geoglyph near us. It's over 300 feet long. I probably would have got it up here to look at if I knew we were going to bring that up, but I'll definitely show you that sometime.
Well, let's save that for the show.
There's some neat stuff here, just, within 25 miles of me. I mean, I can actually go out on site to Weeden Island. Anybody here, if you're watching this video, look up Weeden Island, St. Petersburg, Florida. It's one of the most fascinating Indian sites there is in the country. It's actually the source of probably half of the Indian culture in Florida. It's very awesome.
You got to think if Florida was 300 feet, above sea level, right? Compared to today, what's under there? We're talking about a veritable Atlantean.
Sandbar.
There's tons of stuff that we don't know, that would pop up, and all the islands that are out there in the Caribbean, they would be a lot bigger. They would be connected. Some of them would be more like a continent or landmass.
There's a lot of canals here, Josh, underwater.
All kinds of things going on in
near
this
shore.
region. So we need to keep hitting this stuff so that people can understand that this is something that is unknown. Archaeology is more alive today than they realize. There's so many new things coming out. Our history is getting older. There's kind of an Atlantean rising kind of revisionist thing going on right now, and all these fields are connecting together to kind of say, hey, this stuff has got a lot of merit to it. We have physical evidence now. We have a lot of things going on that are showing that we are older in every sense of the word, and we were more advanced than we realized. So this is some fun stuff. This is why we're doing what we're doing.
It's buried, man. There's so much that's buried. There's so much that's underneath things. There is so much that's been hidden. During the Industrial Revolution, man, there was countless times when, people would just sweep stuff under a rug. There's so many cool sites that were pretty much excavated, whether they were damaged or not. They were excavated. People looked at what was in them, and then they built 35, 40-story skyscrapers on top of them, never to be seen again. And it's a damn shame. And what they're doing here in Florida is the same thing. If there's not too many mosquitoes and no-see-ums, they just they send in the bulldozers, they wreck it all, they fill it with shell, and they build on it. And people move down here from up north and retire.
And we have to realize that that's been going on even in the ancient past.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna do a show on megaliths coming up very soon. And Baalbek is one of those sites. Baalbek is something that this was a site that was used in some very, very ancient time, and people pulled up and civilizations fell, and they said, hey, look at this, we got a nice platform, hey, we could build easy here. I mean, if you're out
why would you build in the woods?
If you're out looking in the woods to build a house and you come across a perfectly symmetrical, flat, angled, stone platform, you're gonna freaking build on it, it's not.
Well, it's like putting a TV on top of another TV.
Yeah.
When one breaks, you get a smaller one and put it on top of it.
Yeah. So this stuff happens. So I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We're pumping them out. Let us know what you think. We got some guys coming on. It's going to be fun. But that was awesome, Dave. Thanks for taking us around the world.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's been one of my favorite subjects for a while, and I read about it the first time probably 7 or 8 years ago, and kind of lost touch with it. So I'm really glad we revisited. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and hope you guys go to look up some of these things and kind of learn a little more about it. And maybe we'll do another kind of a revisit and see if we can get a little more information. But thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate spending our time here with you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And don't forget to go to ancientamnesia.com, where we archive all this information, podcasts. There's tons of articles. Everything's being refreshed, uploaded, and expanded daily. So please visit us and let us know what you think. Otherwise, we will see you soon.
Yep. And watch those videos and give us a like. Cheers.